Well, good evening and welcome to Sky Blue Fans TV. We've got a brilliant show lined up tonight. But before we kick off, a bit of important news. The Sky Blue Fans TV is now officially affiliated with the FSA, the Football Supporters Association. The FSA is the national body that stands up for the fans across the country, and they're supporting us to become an independent voice for you, the Sky Blue supporters. And we'll go into more detail in other episodes, because now on to tonight's discussion, and it's all about football finance. And let's be honest, there's only a couple of people really worth listening to on this subject. One of them is our guest tonight. He's someone who's not only the co-host of the Price of Football podcast and has written the book with the same title, but also one of the few people who can silence Jim White and Simon Jordan on Talk Sport, because when Kieran Maguire speaks, even Simon listens. And it's a great time to have him on, because it's the day after we found out that £15 million has been injected. Well, we've had a £15 million injection of funds basically into the club. Where's it from? What does it mean? And we'll ask him in a moment all about that. Kieran is a lifelong Brighton and Hove Albion supporter, a club whose journey mirrors ours in many ways. Like us, they sold their spiritual home and had to play miles away before it's finally returning to Brighton at the Withdean Stadium, a stadium better known for Steve Ovett than probably football at the time. But now they've become one of the most admired and well-run clubs in the Premier League under Tony Bloom, a model that many, including us, would love to follow. Brighton didn't make it to the top tier until 1979, but we did it before them in 1967. And they were also FA Cup runners-up and relegated, I believe, in the same season in 1983. I clearly remember the replay because it's May the 26th and it was on my 18th birthday, and I almost missed my own party from being drunk in the afternoon. So, Kieran, thank you for coming on tonight. And also joining us is Jack, our accounts man, part of our team, of course. It's great for you to, give us your time, basically, and thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you very much for the invite, Claudio, and the very kind words, and looking forward to having a bit of football finance chat. I've got no idea why anybody in their right mind's interested in this nonsense, by the way. But when you said at the start, I thought you were about to say there's only a couple of people in the country that do this, and we can't find either of them, so we got Maguire instead.
I was going to say something else. I thought, no, you take it. So I thought I better not. But let me start with this. I mentioned about stadiums. And of course, ours is the CBS Arena, and it's owned by Mike Ashley's Fraser's Group. And it's not just a football ground, though. It's a casino, which probably should have interested your owner, seeing as he likes a bit of poker and gambling, doesn't he? It's also a hotel and a conference centre. So is there any real gain in Doug King trying to buy it? And can clubs thrive with just renting? And what are the pros and cons?
Well, I mean, there are quite a few clubs that rent their stadiums. Now, quite often they will rent them from another part of the group. Whereas here, it looks like it's an independent relationship. I think this is, in my opinion, this is an opinion, it's not a fact. So, Mike Ashley, if you're listening, don't sue me. I think that Mike Ashley was a bit stroppy in terms of what happened at Derby County, because he was very keen to buy Derby as a football club. But what happened there was the owner separated the football club from the stadium, put the football club into administration, and therefore was in a really strong position when anybody came in, because if he didn't like the prospective owner, he'd just say, well, yeah, the rent's going to be £10 million a year or some nonsensical figure. And Mike Ashley just decided to walk away from that. So he's now in the position of being the landlord. Though from what I can make out, looking at these accounts, Cov are paying around about £1.4 million in rent for the Rico. I'm going to call it by its proper name. As you know, I've been to Highfield Road to watch Brighton play and the new stadium as well, and I get very confused by stadium names. I still refer to Bolton's as the Reebok, as opposed to the Tough Sheet stadium.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Very, very, very confusing. So, but back to your question. There are benefits in the sense that you can coordinate things as you want. What happens if there's going to be events taking place on non-match days? Well, where does those revenues go? Those revenues currently go to Mike Ashley. what are the issues in terms of catering and merchandise sales? Does the landlord get a slice of those? Are they restricted? Do you have to go and pay step-up penalties if you get promoted to the Premier League? So all of these things result in money leaking out of the stadium. We do have that situation in London, which I would say is slightly different, because that was a superb piece of negotiation by the tenant, that West Ham are paying £3 million a year in rent for a stadium which costs £17 million a year to maintain. Now, if Mike Ashley was being that generous, I'd be say carry on as tenants. But Mike Ashley's being a traditional landlord. I don't think he, as an outside observer, that he's done anything particularly unpleasant to date. But of course, you're there at the coalface. You might be able to correct me on that.
Well, myself and Jack have been in a meeting with Doug King and some other supporter groups, and he didn't seem in any kind of rush to buy the stadium, because I think with the maintenance is going to outweigh renting it, basically, and because it's a casino, a hotel, it's the whole shebang, isn't it? It's not just the football ground. Currently, I don't want to own it. I think we need to get into that Premier League, and I'd sooner spend the money on players to get us up, basically. And that's where I'm at. I don't know where Jack is on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfectly valid option. People want to buy the stadium so that we've got an asset, and we've got a whole football club back together again for the first time in 20 years, as it's been now. So that's obviously an ideal, but is it the first thing on the shopping list? It doesn't have to be. That's all down to opinion, isn't it?
And would you think 1.4 million, does that sound like a good deal? Sounds cheap to me.
I think Sheffield Wednesday are paying Chansiri 2.5 million. So it's a newer stadium. It's I think facilities are better. Trying to work out what's happening at Sheffield Wednesday, and I think everybody, it's about who you support. Your heart goes out to any fans. Let's face it, you've been through it yourself. In terms of the craziness of some of the owners that we're seeing, so I don't think that's excessive. I mean, the way to look at it is to divide it by the number of matches. That's for, let's say you get a maximum of 30 matches from that. That works out as less than 50 grand a match. If you've got 20,000 people turning up, 25,000, it's costing you £2.50 per fan per match for the stadium. It's not too bad.
I love the way you work that out so quickly. That's brilliant.
I've got no friends apart from my spreadsheet. I have no friends.
That's as good as friend as any. My other question before I let Jack in is a player we've got in common is Victor Gyökeres, who it looks like we got you off him for a steal. You could have done a Conceição and sold him for 80 million probably. I've got to say, I don't know you got that much for him either. But anyway, so we got him for next to nothing off you guys. Unfortunately, his buyout clause is dropping every season, so it's gone down to about 65 million. Now we're getting part of that. Are Brighton getting part of it as well? Do you know?
Brighton will get a very, very small sliver,
right?
Because I think Brighton have got 10% or 15% of any profits made by Cov. So therefore, if Cov themselves you're getting 15% of 15%, which works out as 2.25%. I can do these sums in my head. I'm available all week for this type of crap.
So if he does go for 65, that's what it is. So how much are we getting then, basically?
Well, what's Cov's share of the profits? Are we aware of that?
Well, there's a lot of rumours. So some say 10%, some say 15%. That might have been a time-related thing. So it might have been 15% last year, 10% this year. We don't know as a fact. And also, we're not 100% clear whether it's 15% of the price or 15% of the profits.
It's always done on a profit basis.
Oh, okay. Always on the profit. Well, that clears things up. So we sold him for 20 million. They're going to sell him for 60 million. So 10% of that is at least 4, isn't it?
That's 4. Yeah.
Minimum. That's what we're looking at. Minimum. And his price might go up. It might not. It depends how desperate Arsenal get, or PSG, or whoever in for him.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. I saw him play a couple of occasions for us, and he was okay. And I think when he went on loan to Cov, he was okay. And then he made the full signing, and he just seemed to put on a speed spurt and a strength spurt, and he's become the ramshackling swashbuckling player that he is now, and clearly is attracting a hell of a lot of interest back in the Premier League. Sometimes, different players mature at different points, but you just wish him all the best in his professional career as well. I always worry, partly, and it's a function of the job that I do, is that we end up talking about young men as if they're just pieces of inventory, and they are human beings, which I have the honour that I teach for the Professional Footballers Association, so I get to see football players as students, and certainly interacting and engaging them with that, they're just like all my other students, and some of them do say, we just feel at times we're being, that they're not naive. They say we shouldn't look at social media, but we do, and the way that we are spoken about by fans as if we are profit centres it's not how we perceive ourselves. We're dads and boyfriends and sons and brothers and so on. But the perception of a footballer as a piece of inventory these days, I think, is a sad indictment of the rise of football finance as a subject.
What do you think to these buyout clauses? Because obviously there's two clubs in the Premier League now, Arsenal and Man United, desperately need a centre forward. And I feel if there's no buyout clause, one of them would probably put a bid in of 80 million for Gyökeres. But now that's not going to happen, is it? Because obviously it's a buyout. Anybody can come in. He can talk to anyone, can't he?
That's to protect the player, because again, everybody's going to win from this. Is it Porto he's at present? Is it? I'm hopeless on Sporting. God, that's cost me 20% of my Portuguese listenership. So Sporting wanted to sign him. He was concerned, if the player's got faith in himself, what he doesn't want is to be priced out of the market. If he wants to come back to the Premier League, he wants to be able to come back at a price which is attractive. So Sporting will make money, Cov will make money, the player will make money, and this way there's a greater opportunity for the player to earn a higher salary, because if his market value, if there were no buyout clause, was 80 million, he's going for 65, that's the opportunity, if he's got a good agent, to sort of split the difference to a certain extent between the buying club and the player. And that's the way things work in modern football. So these clauses are there for a reason, and they're actually to protect the player in terms of their options going forward. We saw that with Erling Haaland when he moved to Manchester City, that he went for 55 million, and everybody knew he's going to be a bit of a beast in the Premier League.
Yeah, Jack, over to you, Jack.
Thank you. Yeah. So first question really is based on something that's happening tomorrow. And that's an EFL rule that came in last year regarding lease of a stadium if you don't own it. So they're requesting that teams have a 10-year lease, which currently Coventry City do not have at the stadium. I can't remember whether it's either 2 or 3 years remaining, but either way, it's not 10 years. So at present, we're liable to pay a fine as of tomorrow morning. Do you know what that fine is roughly? And do you know why this rule's been brought in specifically? Because it feels targeted at clubs like Coventry, basically.
I don't know the amount of the fine. I will write a note to myself. I'm on quite good terms with the EFL at present, because we try to give them a fair assessment on the show that I do. What's the rationale behind it? It's actually there to encourage clubs to sign long-term deals to protect the club going forward, so over a longer period of time. If you've got a 12-month lease which is continually being renewed, we've certainly seen at non-league level some clubs end up being turfed out of their grounds. And Coventry's a big club, but can you imagine if you were on that 12-month lease and it expires on the 30th of June and it's got to March or April and it's not been renewed, and all of the rumours start going round? And that creates much bigger problems, because how can the club put out for season tickets to be renewed if you don't know where you're going to be playing next season? Because you can't. How does it sign up commercial and hospitality partners on 2 or 3 year deals and so on? So I think the aim is to try to encourage owners when they come in to take a long-term view as to the prospects of the club. unfortunately, there are still charlatans involved in the world of football. Now, Coventry City, in my opinion, don't have one of those, which is good news. Doug King, I think, has been a very progressive owner to date and a very committed owner to date. But I'm certainly aware of things which are happening at other clubs where new owners have come in, and the first thing they're trying to do is that they see the football ground as a piece of real estate to be traded and negotiated with, and things start to fall apart. So I think what we're looking for here is some form of long-term continual certainty. And as a fan, I guess we'd want that as well. You look at what's happened to Cov historically, and you've been like a pinball at times, moving around from ground to ground, and it must have been absolutely awful from your point of view, because we like certainty and we like routine as football fans. As my wife often says to me, you're really boring in the sense that I'm really boring. I'm a teetotal 60-something-year-old accountant, but are you even more boring than that? Because for the last 40 odd years, you've been going to the same pub with the same blokes talking the same crap.
That's normal.
And it's normal, like a good time. And it's really good for you, because at least you are talking. Because otherwise, blokes of a certain age, we stop talking, we stop engaging with the rest of society. So that's good for us. But having that sort of muscle memory as football fans, I honestly think is something to be cherished for as long as we can. And if you do end up moving from ground to ground to ground, it's not healthy for the club, because it creates uncertainty, and it's not healthy for the fan base either.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I think. Should we ask you about the £15 million injection, Kieran? What do you make of that?
Right. Okay. I mean, this came. Just so that listeners know just how dull I am. I have an alerts system for every single football club in England, going down as far as National League North and South, and every single football club in Scotland. So this alert comes from Companies House, and I've set up this little information exchange. So that came through onto my wheelhouse yesterday. So it looks as if I think it's something like 12.1 million shares at £1.22 or something like that. But it adds up. If you multiply the numbers through, it adds up to exactly £15 million. So this could be one of two things. I believe some people have asked the club, and if I was being a little bit critical of the club, I would say I think they could be a little bit more proactive in terms of communication. And if they took such an approach, it would actually stop a lot of the conspiracy theories from running. But it's their choice. Looking at the position of Coventry City, they have debts of £30 million. So they borrowed effectively from Doug King £30 million. And what has happened yesterday is one of two things: either Doug King or another investor, but I think it's almost certain to be Doug King, has put £15 million of fresh cash into Coventry City. And rather than putting it in the form of a loan, which in theory has to be repaid, instead the club has issued shares. It's a bit like the Coventry City said, "Here's Doug, thanks for £15 million. Here's a piece of paper."
Yeah,
and that's all you're getting. Because previously, Doug, you owned 100% of Coventry City Football Club, and now, after giving us £15 million, hey, Doug, you still owe 100% of Coventry City Football Club. So if it's in the form of shares, absolutely fantastic. The alternative to that is it could be that Doug has said, but realistically, the club's never going to be in a position to give the loans back that it has to me, that £30 million worth of debt. Tell you what I'll do, I'll effectively write half of it off. So the difference between a loan and a share is that a loan is where somebody puts money into the club, just like a loan from a bank, and it has to be repaid. So in theory, that had to be repaid. And it could be that Doug's written £15 million of that off. Again, good news. Is it as good news as the shares? No, because it's not physical cash. And there's an argument for saying that owner loans, it's a bit like the bank of mum and dad.
Yeah.
in the sense that, I don't know, it happened to you, and I hope it hasn't. I remember when our kid came to me and said, "Yeah, Dad, just pass me driving test." And I go, "Oh, fantastic!" Mainly due to the fact that I've been paying for the lessons for the last 18 months. Christ, driving lessons have gone up in price. So yeah, passed the driving test, and it was I want a car. I go, "What?" Yeah, I presumed you wanted a car, because otherwise, why are you taking your driving lessons? So that's it. Yeah, and I've seen one that I really like. Oh, go, fantastic. And I'm thinking, I think I know what the next question is going to be. Will you lend me 15 grand for the car? Now, I know that I'm never going to ask for that money back, because it's our kid. And our kid knows that they're never going to be in a position to repay me, because they've got a crap job and they piss all their money away. And young people should do that, by the way. Yeah, don't want to encourage people to save when they're young. But it's in theory a loan, but in practice, it's a gift.
Could I be your son as well, Kieran? I could do with a car.
But you passed your test, Claudio.
Oh yeah, I have. Yeah.
Oh, well, it's okay. That's fine.
So going back to that, then, when he bought the club, apparently all our debts were gone, is what we're told. The club has no debts.
Yeah.
Do you think that's how he bought the club as well, then, in a similar fashion? Because debt just doesn't disappear. There's got to be a debt somewhere.
No, it can disappear, because as part of the deal with Sisu, what you do is that you agree what you are buying.
Okay.
So you agree to buy the assets, the name, the player contracts, and probably most importantly, the share that the Coventry City Football Club own themselves in the EFL. So that's what's being bought from. And then in terms of the obligations, the liabilities, the money which was owed by Cov to Sisu was effectively, again, it's a bit like a parental loan. And in my view, those loans were written off by Sisu as part of the overall deal. And ultimately, as far as Doug King was, what was the price? Did we ever find that out?
No.
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 Well,
no one seems to know.
I've been sticking my nose in, and I've not managed to find out either. But I'm just wondering. But ultimately, he's acquired the rights of Coventry City, the intellectual property rights, the contracts, the stuff that they've got in the office, the training facilities that are under their control, and so on. And normally, you'd acquire all of the liabilities as well. But as part of the deal, Sisu said, "We know that we're quite happy for you to just buy the assets from us, and we'll just take the hit on the loans."
That's interesting. Jack, over to you, mate.
Yeah, amazing. Well, either way, like you say, Kieran, that's good news. One set of news is better than the other, but either way, it's a good news for the financial position of our club, which is great. So, to the Championship now. Simply, what are Championship clubs allowed to spend? Is it just entirely revenue based, or can owners throw money in? And if so, what is the limit to that?
Right. Under the current iteration of the profitability and sustainability rules, a club in the EFL Championship is allowed to lose £13 million per season for the last 3 years in which it has been in the EFL. But if it's been in the Premier League during those 3 seasons, it's allowed to lose 35 million. So if we take a look at the 3 clubs that have just been relegated from the Premier League, so let's take Leicester. The last 2 seasons, they've had one in the Premier League and one in the Championship. So they've got a 35 and a 13, 25, 26. They're going to be in the Championship. So they're allowed to lose £61 million over 3 years. Coventry City, because they've spent 3 years in the EFL, 3 times 13, they're allowed to lose 39. But of that 39, the owner has had to put in at least 24 in the form of shares. So, this could be as part of the initial deal that Doug signed, or it could be connected to the £15 million share issue that we're seeing today. Now, we talk about £39 million, and people then get their calculators out and they say, "Oh, look, this club's lost more than £39 million." It then starts to get a bit nerdy. Every pound that you've spent on the academy is excluded. So, have Cov got a Cat 1 or a Cat 2 academy?
I think it's Cat 2, I think.
Cat 2, right.
Not Cat 1.
Cat 2 running costs normally in the region of 1.5 to 2 mil a year. So therefore that's likely to be another 6 million. Then have they spent money on infrastructure? So you can normally find that out if you go into the accounts. And if I take a look here, that's probably looking at about just over £1 million in the last 3 years. So that's another million. If you've got a women's team, the losses of the women's team are excluded because the EFL and the Premier League want to encourage the growth of women's football. And if you've got a community scheme, and I don't know enough details on Cov's position, but the community schemes run by football clubs are absolutely amazing. They do fantastic work. Well, the money that the club puts into that, again, is excluded because the EFL says, look, if you want to go and spend 50 grand on some sort of scheme trying to get kids to attend more at school or trying to get old blokes to get out of the house and play a bit of walking football, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as they're doing something. Absolutely brilliant, fantastic social value. It really does make a difference. We're not going to penalise you for it by including it as part of your PSR calculation. So you do have all of these add backs, and this is where you get lots of ITK people on Twitter who claim that they know the numbers, but normally they're talking nonsense. I've got sort of, you pick up from getting whispers from clubs. So I'm on good terms with some clubs. Other clubs hate my guts and try to sue me. But you sort of pick up a Cat 2 academy, probably 1.5 to 2 million. A Cat 1 academy in the Championship, you're probably looking 5 to 6 million. Cat 1 academy in the Premier League, you could be looking 18 to 20 mil.
This weekend it's the Euro Millions and there's 200 million up for grabs. My wife said no already. I've put the question to her.
And you're asking me for money for a car, Claudia, and you've already won the lottery. It's a bit cheeky.
So if I wanted to say I won it and I approached Dudkin, I said, here's 75 million. Can I do that? Is that allowed?
Is it allowed? Yes. How will it be treated for PSR purposes? You would have to go into the small print of the EFL constitution. And I think it's something like Rule W61 or the EFL constitution is not a book I'd recommend reading, by the way. But the simple answer is yes, you can do it. Can the club spend that immediately? It starts to get a bit more complicated than that, because I do a podcast, and every single week a listener will come up with a scheme for circumventing PSR, and we have had similar suggestions to this. But if we look at what's happened in Scotland, a guy there, he won £140 million on the Euro Millions, and the first thing he did, he went out and bought Partick Thistle Football Club.
He died shortly afterwards.
He died, yeah. So very sad circumstances, yeah. and it then started to unwind and get really messy, sadly, at the club.
All right, back to you, Jack.
So yeah, that sort of rolls on. So do clubs have a limit on income or funding of any sort?
I think you have to be careful, because if you take a look at the definitions, because again, somebody was asking me, what if a club does some sort of reverse takeover and takes over a haulage company, for example? We were looking at the accounts of Middlesbrough. Could the profits made from Steve Gibson's haulage company be included as part of PSR? And having been through the handbook of the EFL and the Premier League, the answer to that is no, because it's got to be money which is effectively generated from the club's main property assets, which will be the stadium and the training facilities. So if you've got a haulage company which is running lorries up and down the country, or something similar to that, that would be excluded.
Fair enough. Okay. Is there a salary cap in Championship clubs, or is it due to like determined by income, or is there just no rules? You can pay people what you want.
There's no rules at all as far as the Championship is concerned. In League One, we've got something called the SCMP, the Salary Cost Management Protocol. I don't know who came up with that. But what it says there is that you are allowed to spend 60% of your revenue on player wages. So you have to separate out playing wages from non-player wages. But what you're also allowed to do in League One is that they had something called football fortune, and they just tightened up the rules. But it used to be for every pound the owner put into the club in the form of shares, you could spend an extra pound on wages. So that allowed, and sort of for the past few years, it's allowed clubs to effectively try to buy themselves out, especially out of League Two. And in League Two, the SCMP was only 50%. But that's why some clubs are doing crazy things. If you take a look at Salford City, for example, I think for every £100 in wages, so for every £100 of revenue, they're paying out around about 140, 150 in wages, because they've got this guy from Singapore called Peter Lim, who was just putting money into the club in the form of shares, allowing them to boost their expenditure. He's now gone, and he's been replaced by David Beckham. I don't think David Beckham is going to be doing the same.
Weren't Reading doing the same, Kieran, as well? Weren't they paying out the loans?
Yeah, I mean, Reading was a complete basket case. I mean, fortunately for Reading fans, that has now stopped. The owner was putting in ridiculous amounts, and that works until it stops working. And here we've got a constant repeating problem of, if the owner's personal circumstances change and the owner is subsidizing the club suffers, and fans don't care during the good days. If you take a look at what happened at Chelsea, it cost Roman Abramovich £900,000 a week for 19 years to subsidise that club. But Chelsea fans worship him, and you can understand why. Was it 4 or 5 league titles, 2 Champions League? I certainly grew up with Chelsea were a cup team at best. They were never serious contenders. So he changed sort of the culture and the psyche of the club. And that was fine until we find out that he was perhaps closer mates to Vladimir Putin than we realised. And with Putin being a madman in invading Ukraine, he became persona non grata. And then the government froze all of its assets. And in theory, it should have frozen Chelsea Football Club. Chelsea Football Club should have closed down. But the government made a decision. I think it was the right decision, that there was a special dispensation because the impact it's got on the fan base, and lots of people would have been impacted who have done nothing wrong themselves, apart from being Chelsea fans, of course.
The PRS, like between the Premier League and the EFL, it's huge, isn't it? The difference is massive. Do you think they'll ever be aligned or become a bit closer? And also, is there any mileage in having a Premier League too?
Right. The gap, for people not familiar with the numbers, if you are in the EFL Championship, you will get probably £9.5–10 million a year from a combination of both the EFL TV deal and what we refer to as solidarity payments. So the Premier League actually does give a slice of its TV revenue to the EFL, and that's distributed between all 72 clubs. But even so, you put the two together, that gives us £9.5–10 million. If you finish bottom of the Premier League, I think you'll probably end up this season with 110. So there is that huge difference. And the Premier League will argue that it's the Premier League's money. So if you want to change that, there's 2 ways of changing that. First of all, Premier League clubs could act to be more benevolent, to be more generous, to increase the solidarity payments, perhaps through decreasing the money they keep themselves, perhaps from having tweaking the parachute payments, which go to clubs who are relegated. So that would be one option, but that would be turkeys voting for Christmas.
Yeah.
If you were in the Premier League, why vote to have less money? This is one of the problems of democracy. You act in short-term self-interest, ignoring the fact that if you're one of the smaller clubs, there's a fair chance you're going to be back in the Championship in a year or two. You just live for today. You just live for the current season. So could it happen if it comes through a vote? Yes. Is there another way that it could happen? Well, here the independent regulator, one of its remits is to look at the distribution of money between clubs. So somehow I ended up writing 2 research papers for the government on sort of a state of play of the finances in the English game. One was during COVID and one was after COVID. And I've ended up on having to sort of talk to MPs and be nice to them, which is sort of not really my type of thing. But they certainly are aware of it. But they're looking at it through their lens. Is this going to get me votes? Is this going to get me re-elected? Whereas I'm trying to be sort of an independent person here. And the regulator's remit, once this becomes legislation, I think there's a fair chance that it's going to be legislation, although we're living in a pretty unpleasant world at present. So I'm not sure it's a priority for the government, but assuming that this is passed as legislation, and we've been through now 2 iterations of Parliament, then what the regulator will do to both the EFL and the Premier League is say, sort it out yourselves. I'll give you 6 months. If you still can't sort it out, and let's face it, they've had 3.5 years to sort it out and they failed to do so, then I want your last and best offer. Send them in to me and I'll compare and I'll see what I think is best. And then in theory, the regulator can make a decision, or the regulator can say, actually, they're both crap proposals. I'm going to write out one myself. If that is the case, then we get more money.
And quickly before I let Jack come back in, so say Leicester. No, I won't say Leicester. Who else came down? Ipswich. Say Ipswich go back up. You can't have your rivals going up. If Ipswich go back up, what happens to that parachute payment?
Well, you raised a really good issue there, Claudio. This is something which
that was going to ask
that. Sorry, before you answer that, can I just ask? So I've got a 4-part bit on parachute payments. So firstly, exactly what is the income of a parachute payment, assuming that a club stays in the Championship for 2 years? Have Luton lost their parachute payments because they've gone down to League One? It was rumoured, but I don't think it was ever hard and fast, told to us. Thirdly, when do clubs get parachute payment? Is it 2 lump sums, one at the beginning of each season? Is it spread out like a monthly fee or a 3 monthly fee? And when exactly does it stop? Is it 2 years if you stay in the Championship?
Okay.
So it's quite a lot all in one go.
Right, I'll try and remember those. In year 1, you get 55% of the amount of money which is split evenly between the Premier League football clubs. So that works out as around about 48 million pounds. In year 2, it decreases from 55% to 45%. So you're going to get 38 or 39 million pounds. You don't get the solidarity payments at the same time. If you have been in the Premier League and immediately relegated, that's what you get. But if you've been in the Premier League for more than 1 season, you get a 3rd year of parachute payments. And in the 3rd year, you get 20%, which works out, by some of my calculations, about 17-18 million pounds. So you add those 3 together, 47 plus 38 is 85, plus 17, you're probably talking somewhere just over a ton in parachute payments.
So Southampton have gone down with 157 million then. Is that right?
Well, no, they've gone down, but remember they're going to get 48 million pounds in 25-26. Okay, yes, plus their money for being in the Premier. Yes, so 150. So it's spread over 2 years. Going to your second question, Jack, you get your parachute payments for being relegated from the Premier League. Where you end up, the Premier League doesn't care. So therefore, Luton Town this season will receive £38 million in parachute payments. You would think that that would be enough for them to return to League One, given that the average revenue, I'm looking at another spreadsheet here, the average revenue for a club in League One is 8 million from TV deals, broadcasting and commercial. But I give you the case of Sunderland. Sunderland were relegated. They were then relegated again. And because they'd been in the Premier League, they actually ended up with 2 years worth of parachute payments in League One. But despite the genius of the management of Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven, for anybody that's watched Sunderland Till I Die, they failed to get promoted back to the Championship. And congratulations to them, by the way, in getting promoted to the Premier League now. Even though that they were in league, so they had this huge financial, as well as the fact that Sunderland's a huge club with a big following, as we know. Despite all of that extra money coming in, they made so many bad decisions at senior level that they ended up in League One for a few years. Your third question, Jack, as to when the money is paid, it is paid normally, you'll get around about half of it in the summer. And then I think there are 2 or 3 installments over the rest of the year, because that's when the Premier League itself makes its payments to its own member clubs. And I've forgotten what the fourth question was.
Well, it was kind of when does it run out? So, like you say, some clubs get 2, some get 3. And you've answered the case of Luton. They do still get it, even though it was heavily rumoured that it was stopping. So, Luton, you know, they've got this player base that still includes players with Premier League experience, mostly Championship experience that they've had for 2-3 years before that and last season. And now they've got 38-40 million plus whatever they're going to make in TV and everything else. So now that Birmingham and Wrexham have come out of League One, they're going to be a powerhouse, are they not, financially?
Well, they certainly will have the biggest revenues in that division. I mean, there's some other clubs where owners are putting in an awful lot of money. Stockport County are one example. It's a bizarre one, because I remember going to Luton in the Premier League. Brighton played there on a Tuesday night. They beat us 4-0, and it flattered us. They absolutely mullered us. And I thought, well, do they play like that for the rest of the season? This was it. This was sort of early February. They will stay up. Didn't win another match for the rest of the season. It was bizarre. They were brilliant that night.
Yeah, can I just have a question from somebody watching. Doug Bolam says, Kieran, is it a must we get to the Premier League in the next season or 2 for financial reasons, or are we healthy where we sit now towards the top of the Championship?
Well, Doug, I think promotion is desirable but not essential, as they say on many job applications, in the sense that if we take a look at Coventry's financial results for the last 2 years, Coventry have broken even due to profits on player sales. So the Gyökeres deal has made the fact that Coventry are actually in a strong position in terms of being able to compete in the transfer market in the Championship, because they're not restricted by PSR. It then comes down to the budget, which will be set by the owner. If you don't go up, it's not an issue. The concern is that you end up like Bristol City, Middlesbrough, Preston, Millwall, Stoke, Swansea, and so you end up with sort of that rump of clubs in the Championship who never really look like getting into a playoff place and are too good to go down. And after sort of 2 or 3 seasons of that, it's quite difficult to motivate yourself at times. Especially Tuesday night away to Middlesbrough, we're 11th, they're 14th. It really tests you as a fan. Issues such as that.
Ian Courts has asked, how can clubs carry on being in debt? Surely we will lose more clubs. Are there any big clubs in danger of a relegation from being out of business?
I mentioned that Sheffield Wednesday are a mess. If it was any other business, I would say the clubs would go to the wall, but they tend to be rescued. Either the owner will continue to fund them and will take an offer and will walk away with their fingers burnt. If you take a look at Randy Lerner at Villa, it cost him £150 million. Mel Morris at Derby, who I'm not a big fan of for what he did at the club, but he lost 200 mil, losing more than 100. So people do keep putting the money in, or what you will see is that fans won't let the clubs die. So the fans will create some form of phoenix organisation. We've seen what's happened at both Macclesfield and Bury. We've got the likes of Leicester City, which are now a fan-owned club, AFC Wimbledon, fan-owned club, and so on. So there are clubs whose finances are precarious, and Sheffield Wednesday are top of my list. There's another club in the Championship as well that I'm worried about, but I'd rather not publicly say who it is. In fact, there's two I'd rather not publicly say who it is, because that just sort of creates negativity. So it is a genuine cause for concern, because as well as the owner's circumstances changing, sometimes the owners just think, why am I putting in 300-400 grand a week into this club? Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah,
go for it.
That sounded a bit circumspect. And I've got 10,000 people each week calling me a wanker. When I'm in the director's box, I didn't sign up for this. So and then the owner goes, well, if that's what it'd be like, I'm turning the taps off.
It reminds me of the old days when, of course, we've got a board of one because Doug King is the board of directors, and fans used to shout, "Sack the board," and then used to think, well, they're not going to sack themselves, are they? It's not really going to happen, is it? Glenn Watkins says, who's actually, and our club historian Jim Brown, who I do a podcast with as well, the Sky Blue History podcast. You need to give it a listen, Kieran. It's quite good. We'll even give Brighton a mention one week. Glenn Watkins says, who's the best and worst run Championship clubs? And Jim Brown wanted to know, how did we stack up against the other Championship clubs?
The worst run club is Sheffield Wednesday, because they got the worst owner.
Yeah.
If you have failed to pay wages on time 2 months out of the last 3, if you are now, I don't know, if you read some of the pronouncements from Dejan Chansiri along the lines of, I've not got any money, but I'm phoning up some of my mates to see if they'll be prepared to put in, and this is a club which is losing £1.5 million a month. All of a sudden you find out who your mates are. And most of your mates have got far more sense. So am I getting this money back? Well, you might do, you might not. So it's it is poorly run at the executive level. I'm a little bit concerned about a couple of others, but I'd say Wednesday are by far the worst. If we take a look at the best, and what I'll do here, I'll just switch my spreadsheets. I'm just looking at these. Well, Rotherham always used to be the best run club in the Championship. They're the only ones who would ever break even, but they'd always get rewarded by being relegated. So, that's the price you pay. And the reason why they got relegated was that their average wages was a third less than the second lowest players in the division. Looking at some other clubs who I think are pretty well run, QPR these days are much better than they used to be. Sunderland under the new owners, they're well run. And then you look at others and you go, well, they're all losing. Norwich are pretty good. And they had to be good because nobody was buying Delia's cookbooks anymore. So therefore, she didn't have any spare cash to subsidise them. and sometimes you have to be good out of necessity, rather than desire. And I look at the others. I'm just looking at my list here, and Bristol City losing £20 million a year. You've got and then a couple of clubs where the owner of Millwall, John Berylson, he tragically died a couple of years ago when his car hit a tree. His kids are now putting in £1 million a month. just as he did. And you don't think as Millwall as being a club which we overspending money. At Preston North End, the Hemmings family again. The father died, and he was the big Preston fan, but the kids are putting £1 million a year into Preston just to keep them 13th in the Championship, and you do wonder about the sanity of the way that football clubs are run, but these owners just keep coming back and doing the same thing again and again.
Yeah, when we were relegated from the Premier League in 2001, it was rumoured that we went down with debts of between 40 and 60 million, which what would that equate to now would be an horrendous amount, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think you can multiply that by 5 or 8 or something. Certainly as far as the revenues of the Premier League are concerned, there is a huge multiplier, and that's perhaps explained why Coventry went into that. You get into that vortex of financial despair, which is very difficult to extricate yourself from.
And trying to build a ground as well, which we ended up not owning. Jack?
Yeah, hopefully we'll give Claudio's voice a bit of a rest for a while. You're talking about Championship clubs and what they're making and losing. So this is our statement of profit and loss, basically, concluding 31st of May 2024. So obviously it's a year old now. And like you mentioned with the sales of Victor Gyökeres and Gus Hamer, which we still don't know if we've got all the money for, which shows a very positive turnover of almost 30 million there, and a end point of a profit and loss of 8.6 million. So where do we compare to the rest of the Championship if we're having a profit of almost 9 million and you're talking about clubs losing millions a year?
Again, over across to my next spreadsheet. Well, you're very much at the top of the list. Watford made 18 million, but then they sold João Pedro and Hassan Kamara. They'd just been relegated from the Premier League, so therefore they sold some of their players and booked profits. And after that, Coventry were the only other club that had greater profits was Southampton. And again, Southampton had just been relegated, so they sold a load of their better players back to the Premier League. So they made a profit of 36, but of that 36 million pounds of profit, 123 of that came from player sales. So had they not sold players, they would have lost nearly 90 million pounds. So again, it goes back to that we're using football players as make-weights and pieces of inventory to dig clubs out of financial holes.
So as a Brighton fan whose model has been selling players, and you've been very successful at it, clearly knocking on the door of European football for a few seasons now, on that basis, is that the only way to currently run a club from the Championship into the Premier League successfully? Or is that not the only strategy that will work?
I think it is certainly a strategy, and it did work for Brighton, and it did work as well for Brentford. Remember, Brentford were playing in the stadium which held 11,000, and they managed to get into the Premier League before they moved in, and they timed it just right as they moved into the GTEC. I think the Brentford model was very, very smart, and I get a bit embarrassed about talking about Brighton because everybody goes, "Oh yeah, they're a bit good at what they do." They are very good at what they do, but nobody likes a teacher's pet. But that's where they are. That is certainly one way of doing it. The other way is to a certain extent is to get lucky. You get a couple of loan players. You think about when Huddersfield were promoted. They had they had Palmer. They had Izzy something from Chelsea. They had 2 players from Chelsea, and they had Aaron Moy on loan from Manchester City. So 2 players on loan from Chelsea and 1 player on loan from Manchester City, and they were promoted on the strength of those three loanees. So if you've got a good relationship with another club and that allows you to sign those players on loan who make a positive impression, that can accelerate you through into the playoffs. It doesn't matter. And let's face it, nobody cares whether you finish 3rd, 4th, 5th or 6th, as long as you finish in one of them. And then on the back of that, they were promoted. Luton, again, went up by getting it right for one season, and fair play to them for doing so. It's the same with Ipswich. So you do admire these clubs. But if I look at the Ipswich, Ipswich lost 800 grand a week in getting promoted to the Premier League, and it's not quite the fairy story that the media like to put out. And if the owners are willing to put that money in, I think fair play to them. But it's never quite as romantic as you think it's going to be when you dig into the numbers.
At what point, though, do the EFL step in? Because they're staggering amounts of money that is. It's almost like they wait until they get promoted, then get relegated and hit them with the points deduction. Shouldn't something be done beforehand, if possible?
In theory, yes, but it's very difficult for the EFL to have foresight. And then you've got, when they do try to do things, they end up in a very complicated legal pie of nonsense. If we take Leicester City, for example, when Leicester City were relegated from the Premier League in 2023, one of the things you're supposed to do is that at the start of the season, you show the EFL your budget for the coming year. And Leicester said, no, we're not going to do it. And EFL says, we're not going to do it. We're going to make you follow a business plan. And then Leicester said, okay, we're going to get our lawyers out. And what the lawyers managed to prove was that Leicester City, in 23-24, the Premier League could not prosecute them and the EFL could not prosecute them because Leicester transferred their share in the Premier League to the EFL on the 15th of June. And therefore, the lawyer said, well, on the 15th of June, 2023, Leicester were no longer a shareholder in the EFL, so you can't have a go at them. And then it said to the Premier League, well, you can't have a go at Leicester for 23-24 because between the 16th of June and the 30th of June, they were part of the EFL. And the EFL and the Premier League both looked at their handbooks and go, oh, jeepers creepers. And this was down to the fact that they'd not looked at their own handbooks. So those handbooks have now been changed to such an extent that Leicester City are now going to be up before a commission, and that the EFL has changed its rule book so that a points deduction given by the Premier League can now be applied in the EFL Championship, and also the EFL could take a separate look at Leicester's books and have another commission for season 24-25. So Leicester could be on the receiving end of two separate points deductions from two separate governing bodies who are slowly getting their act together.
Well, you've given us even more reason to dislike them.
Sort of jumped the gun on my questions, Claudio, because I wanted to sort of bounce back at Kieran on the loan point that he said Huddersfield had done it very successfully with loans, and obviously we were the only team in the whole of the Football League without a single loan player last season. And now, and like Kieran said as well, with having a relationship with the Premier League club, we've now got Frank Lampard, who obviously has a very good relationship with a certain Premier League club who have 1 million young players at their disposal that they just throw anywhere. So you've heard it here, Doug King and Frank Lampard. Kieran says, go and loan a bunch of your mates. Simple as go and do it and we'll get to the Premier League. That's it. That's the model. We've got it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not Chelsea's biggest fan, because if you're a Brighton fan, you loathe Chelsea. Because they've had 18 members of staff off Brighton in 2 years, which is nuts. But to say that they loan players anywhere isn't quite the case. They are very, very forensic as to where they are willing to lend players, and they do an awful lot of research into the receiving club. But certainly, having a relationship with somebody as high profile as Chelsea, as Lampard, can only be to the benefit. Yeah, I think if Chelsea have got a choice of two clubs and it's Preston or Coventry, they'll say, well, yeah, it's one of our own, is our Frank. Yeah, we'll give you the nod.
Well, there you go. That's a positive bit. And then as well, on the sort of point you mentioned about clubs selling assets and being very successful. I know it's not the only model, but it has been a success story. I don't know how much you know about, let's say, the Championship's players and what they have. We have a very sellable asset at the moment in Jack Radoni, who has 3 years left on his contract, I believe, as one of the Championship's best players, potentially Championship player or in the team of the season that's just gone. You know, almost 10 goals, over 10 assists. Should we be looking at selling him and rebuilding on that basis? Or is that something that, I mean, I'm just asking for your opinion here, not like a financial perfect answer, but should we be looking at selling him and building based on that? Or should we be looking at keeping hold of that and going forwards? Or is that a point to get your book in?
Well, it's not even my book, but I'm just going to show you this book. This book is called How to Win the Premier League, and it's been written by a guy called Dr. Ian Graham. And Ian Graham was the head of research at Liverpool Football Club. And it's a brilliant book. And I'm not just saying it because he name checks me on a few occasions, but it's a brilliant all-round book. And what he says about the transfer market is really intriguing. The biggest misconception in football is that you can buy success. If you take a look at Liverpool last season, they won the Premier League. How much did they spend? They spent £12 million on an Italian striker who played about 4 games. So, you know, if you've got a good manager who can develop players, who can develop a system, it actually makes far more sense to get your existing players and get them tied down on a long-term basis. Look what Liverpool have just done. You know, Van Dijk and Salah, best centre half and the best striker in the Premier League last season, and they've now got them for another 2 years. You know, to replace them would have cost the club 250 mil. So it's always an awkward one. But the reason why I make reference to that book is Ian goes through a lot of data, and he says if you are looking at players costing, I think it was the parameter was more than £25 million, 2/3 of them will fail. And you go, what do you mean by fail? He says, well, just look, and then his data shows, if you take a look at the 2 years after those players are signed, if they have played less than 25 games a season, or I think 25 games over the 2, that's a failure, isn't it? Yeah, that means somebody who's coming, he's playing in the Carabao Cup. Who cares about the Carabao Cup? Let's look at Premier League games. So it really is a case of not spending big. And I know as fans, we feel that when the club is spending big, that's a statement of intent by the club owner. Look, I'm spending £50 million. Alpha male, beat your chest. Look at this. Isn't it absolutely fantastic? But actually, it's the guys that go in. Liverpool have spent half as much in the transfer market over the last 10 years as Chelsea, as Manchester City, as Manchester United, and so on. And yet, they've won the Champions League during that period. They've won the Premier League twice. And if you go and watch them play, and I'm not saying that because I work in the city of Liverpool, they play some absolutely amazing football. And they're doing it on a lower budget. But what they do is they put all their money into wages. If we get a good player, we want that player to stay. We want that player to feel valued and so on. So it's a case of just getting it right. If you sell him, get 3 players in for £10 million each, and they all turn out to be superstars, then that policy works. If they turn out to be Mason Mount at Chelsea, Mason Mount at Manchester United, 70 million. Anthony at Manchester United, 80 million.
Sancho at Man United, 80 million.
80 million. Yeah, just player X Manchester United, with the exception of Bruno Fernandes. And the chances are
Hoyland, Ferguson, and more.
Yeah. When is Donny van der Beek's season going to come? We're talking about it.
and then to circle back again to where we were when Claudio mentioned Leicester, what points deduction are they looking at? Are they looking at a fine? And is that going to come for this season?
I don't think it will be a fine, because we now have a precedent being set in Nottingham Forest and Everton cases in the Premier League, in the case of Birmingham City and others in the EFL, that if you exceed the PSR limit, the normal tariff will be a points deduction. On the basis of my calculations, which I've not seen Leicester's accounts in detail, so I'm making some very sort of 30,000 feet assumptions here. On the basis of my calculations, they probably should have had a 7 points deduction last season in the Premier League, but that was for season 22-23, 23-24. I don't know what the figures will work out as. So yeah, I think it would be a sizable one. That won't necessarily prevent them from being in the top 6 because they will have a pretty impressive squad. We've seen Leeds United get relegated and get from the Championship to League One, and yet still were able to get into the playoffs this season with a 15-point deduction. It just makes it that much more difficult. But if you get a good start to the season, all of a sudden, the fans are up for it because they become weaponized, they become tribalized because it's the evil EFL that are doing this against their club. They're picking on their club. There's a vendetta against our club, and that can transfer through to the players as well. So yeah, I think if found guilty, and remember habeas corpus, whilst we still have it, and protect habeas corpus, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, it's a very, very precious thing. Innocent until proven guilty. If they are guilty, I think, we'll be looking at minimum of 6, could be double that if the EFL decides to sanction them as well.
I've got a question here from Leicestershire Sky Blue. How much of Sky's TV revenue can be attributed to fans like myself subscribing to Now TV purely for Championship football, specifically Coventry games?
Well, Sky are very, very coy when it comes to their finances, and I don't know whether you've been following things recently. There's just been a few redundancies at Sky Sports. It's not making a lot of money, so trying to work out which fans are making the biggest contribution, I think, would be a difficult one. But there is a growing issue as far as broadcasters are concerned, because so many people are taking the alternative, which is dodgy fire sticks and so on. If I think about my WhatsApp groups, everybody else is watching football on a fire stick. I can't do that because I've got a slightly elevated position. I always say to people, look at the optics, and the optics of somebody like me having a fire stick would just look absolutely dreadful. The Premier League, who don't like me, would have an absolute field day.
Can I ask a question about Mike Ashley? Because obviously Fraser's Group owns the stadium and everything. Me personally, I thought he was a good owner at Newcastle. Now, a lot of their fans think he wasn't. But what's your opinion on Mike Ashley? Because I thought he did a good job.
You have to determine the definition of good. Mike Ashley's Newcastle were a sustainable football club, because in the period from 2008 to 2021, when he owned the club, overall that period of time, it made a profit of £110 million. That's great. The fans would say no ambition, no investment in players, no investment in infrastructure. In the end, they were sort of giving tickets away to try to make the stadium look full. There were boycotts, there was disillusion. I mean, I can remember going to St James's Park during that period of time, and I've never seen a flat Geordie before a match. Normally they're quite vocal, but they were really down in the dumps. In the 3 years of the PIF ownership, that £110 million of profit has gone into £140 million of loss. But at the same time, Newcastle United have qualified for the Champions League twice and won their first trophy in 60 years. So financially, Mike Ashley is a better owner. Emotionally, and we are emotional investors in our clubs, he was crap.
Yes, that leads me nicely onto state-owned clubs then, because obviously that's what they are, similar to Man City. Firstly, will Man City ever be resolved? Because it's going on forever. And what would be the penalties that would matter now? Because, I mean, they could strip them of their titles and all that, but for the teams who then win the titles, it kind of means nothing, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is slow progress. The hearing finished in the second week of December. So we are now 6 months, 26 weeks into determining a verdict. Why is it taking so long? Because there are 130 charges covering a period of 9 years. That's an awful lot of evidence to review. My understanding is that it's something like 500,000 pieces of separate evidence that the commission has to consider, and it's 3 blokes. That's a lot of paperwork to go through, and then they've got to compare and check and so on. If we take a look at the charges, if we sort of narrow them down to 3, then there's the accusations made at Manchester City are, first of all, that they have fraudulently received money from the owner and pretended that it has been from sponsors. Owner money isn't part of PSR, sponsor money is. So if proven guilty of that, that's corporate fraud. That's lying. That's misrepresentation. Big book to be thrown at the club. Second accusation is that they've been paying players and managers off book. So one of the accusations is that Roberto Mancini was paid £2 million in 2016 to be the coach of Manchester City, and was also paid £2 million by a club in Abu Dhabi for 4 days coaching.
Right.
Now, has he done anything wrong? If he's put it on his tax return, no, he hasn't. But the commission could not force Roberto Mancini to speak at the hearing. So I don't know whether he has spoken or he hasn't, but there's certainly rumours going round that he was asked to speak and he said no. And there's nothing that they could do. So where's the evidence? The third accusation, and I think here Manchester City will be found guilty of this, is that they've not cooperated with the Premier League. But City say, well, why should we cooperate with the Premier League? Because the Premier League charges are based on somebody hacking our email system. So we think that that's an inappropriate method through which to prosecute us. And if you then take a look at what happened with UEFA's charges against Manchester City, Manchester City's guilty verdict was upheld on the non-cooperation, and they had to pay a €10 million fine.
Oh, that's interesting. I've got a question here from Richard Overson, who, when Sisu were here and the club was struggling, Richard did a lot of background stuff in keeping the club running. He wants to know, how do you value the football club?
That's a very good question. Come to one of my lectures here, Richard, and I'll talk you through it for about 4 hours. I can bore for Britain on this. I've got to be honest, the traditional valuation methods that we would use in investment banking, in sort of the mergers and acquisition market, where you look at future cash flows and you make adjustments for this, that, and the other, and you apply imaginary interest rates and so on, they all don't work because football clubs don't generate cash. You then say, well, let's say how much profit they're making. You go, hold on, they're all making losses, so you can't do that. So what we tend to do is that we look at how much revenue the club is making on average, and then you multiply that by a number. Now, that number for a club in the Championship is probably in the region of about 1.8 to 2.5. So if we take a look at the Derby County sale, they were sold for 55 million. They're making around about, in the League One, about 25, 26 million. So they were sold for just over 2 times their revenue. With Rangers being sold last week, they normally make 85 million a year. We think that the deal last week valued them at 150. So that's sort of a multiplier of 1.8. So you put a few of those into a calculator, you churn out an expected number, and then the rest of it is simply haggling, because actually most football clubs are worth £1. And that's it. Who in their right mind would take over a loss-making business and a business which has been losing money? And you look at Todd Bowley acquiring Chelsea for 2.5 billion, and as I said earlier, it lost £900,000 a week for 19 years. Absolutely bonkers.
The figures are mental, aren't they? There's a question here from Dan who says, how much money do Championship clubs receive for a game on Sky?
It varies. It used to be, I think if you were the away team, it used to be sort of a standard £10,000. which really cheesed off Leeds United, because they were the biggest players in the Championship year in, year out, and that they had many of their away fixtures. It was, if you were a Championship club, it was normally somewhere between 30 to 100,000 for a home fixture from Sky. But because there are now more matches being sold effectively for little more money, I suspect that's been scaled down.
Do the clubs have any say if they? Because we played Leeds United, we had it moved very short notice, wasn't it, Jack? And we had to play. We thought unfairly before an FA Cup match, and when there was 3 weeks a month later, but for some reason they wanted to shove it straight in there. Do the club have a say, or they just have to go, okay, fair enough, we'll have to hold it?
No. If you get into bed with the devil plays the tune, and Sky control football, and that's not. And what Sky do is absolutely brilliant, by the way. The quality of the product is fantastic, but they dictate in terms of timings.
Yeah, because what happens is the fixtures come out. Everybody says, the club move the fixtures, and we've got no say in it. There's one last question here. Well, actually, it's from Graham Cockerell. I'm enjoying this podcast. It's lovely to get Kieran's viewpoint.
Thank you, Graham.
All right. I believe we're going to have to let you go, Kieran. I believe we've had you for over an hour. Are you happy?
Mrs. M is a bit fed up of football finance, because this is my. It's Thursday, and this is the 23rd interview I've done this week.
I did say to Jack, he's been doing loads, and but all I can say is thank you so much for giving us your time.
Well, thank you for the invite. It's much appreciated.
No, it was great for you to come on, and hopefully you'll come on again when something major happens, like Mike Ashley buys the football club.
Who knows?
But thank you again, and thank you for coming on and just being with us tonight. Very informative and very grateful.
Cheers, guys. Play on Sky Blues. All the best.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers.
Up the Seagulls. Wow.
Fantastic.
Yes, I quite enjoyed that. That's a bit different, isn't it, to get somebody of such esteem and great information. And well, thanks everybody for watching. We're going to still carry on because there's just a couple of little things we want to talk about. We kind of did ask some of your questions in the questions that we asked. I was looking through, but it's very difficult, and I didn't realise we'd gone on for so long actually. But that was really good. So
I've got one more question, unfortunately, just before his time, and you can sort of think about this in the comments. So I was going to ask the question. Finally, I mean, he hinted that we were third best, but that doesn't really count teams that are going up and coming back down. So yeah. I was going to ask, who are the financial powerhouses in the Championship for the coming season? Is it the three that came down, Leicester, Ipswich, Southampton, along with Sheffield United with their parachute payments, and Birmingham, Wrexham coming up? Unfortunately, we didn't get to ask that question, so we won't know for certain. But it's very, very positive that we're trading a profit, and the only two better clubs are Watford, QPR, and Southampton. And Southampton's based on Premier League money and player sales. So,
also Wrexham, from what I gather, because I do listen to the podcast he does, and Wrexham's money from Netflix goes to the owners. It doesn't go to the club. I always thought it was money that was going to go to the club. It doesn't. They pocket that. All the other stuff that for the club is sponsorship, and obviously wherever they generate. So I don't think they're going to be. Oh, this is going to bite me on the bum, isn't it? I don't think they'll be as powerful as people think they're going to be. Blues might be. I think that's different because the Wrexham. I mean, obviously Wrexham want to get to the Premier League. It would be great for the show, but I don't think they're going to be that much of a powerhouse, basically. But then again, look at Bournemouth. You know, they're in the Premier League on 12,000. We've had some international call-ups, haven't we, this week, which is means I might have to watch some football now. So who's been called up, Jack? Who we had?
Yeah, so the latest two, obviously, we all saw Brandon Thomas Asante's goal from a couple of weeks ago. The latest call-ups, we've got Joel Latabodiere, one of the reggae boys, as they're known, for Jamaica. And, of course, our very own Haji Wright, that I'm sure Jonah will be happy to see that one of our players is hopefully going to get some minutes under his belts and get some confidence back. That might do him the world of good, based on a bit of a poor end of a season for Hadji, unfortunately. But it's good news that we've got players about. And I don't know what anyone else's opinion are, but personally, my opinion of Joel Latabodiere is that he is surplus to requirements. And hopefully, if he puts in some good performances for Jamaica, that might mean another club come in for him and we get some profit and we can work on buying a replacement. I don't know what you think about that, Claudio.
Yeah, we need some. I think we need a couple of. We need to freshen up the squad, don't we? But I've said this for a while with our defence. We definitely need players who can come in and just make a bit of a difference. We need to do that step up. I don't think we're going to do it with the squad of players we've got. We know that. I don't think any supporter who's watched them over the last 3 seasons will say, "Oh, we're all right as we are," because we're not. We know we have to improve, especially defensively. And unfortunately, I think Latty might be one of those who may suffer. How much game time will bidders get? Players like that. I mean, De Silva ended the season well, but is he the answer? Probably not. So it's difficult. But we can't just get rid of players because we're not in a position. Although we've done okay, I don't know. Is that what that 15 million is all about? We don't know, do we? But he is right about why doesn't Doug come out and say stuff before the rumours come in? But he's very secretive, and he's probably thinking it's my business. If I want to do what I want with it, I'll do what I want with it. It's my money.
And to be fair to Doug, he said from the beginning he wants to be an open and communicative owner, but he said at no point will he talk about finances or transfers. Right. He just won't do it. He's openly said that from minute one. We're all going to obviously ask him, and he's just going to say, look, I said from the beginning, I'll talk to you about everything, but not finances and not transfers. And that is fair enough, because we don't want to know whether he's a millionaire, billionaire, and got loads of money. We don't want to know if he's skint. We don't really care. The point is we're making money and we're moving upwards in the world, slowly, but hopefully, surely.
What was fascinating, what Kieran said, was that if I did win that 200 million, I just can't simply turn up with 75 million and go, here you are. Which is, I think, I just thought you could do that. So it looks like I'm going to have to buy Messi and get him around the house doing the hoovering or something, and then do a bit of keepy uppies in the back garden with him. That'd be quite fun.
In the world of finance, as we found out with Man City, there are always ways of labelling money as different things. So you might loan Doug some money, and he may place that into the football club in ways that he can. Like Kieran said, he can pour all of that into the academy with literally no fallback. So we could turn our academy to a Category 1 academy with players that are potentially going to break into the first team. That you could do that, Claudio.
Yeah. Now the one question I wanted to ask, but you spoke so much that I couldn't get a word in.
Oh yeah.
Could Doug sponsor the shirts, and to what amount? How could he get around that? Because this is the effect what Man City tried to get away with. So it's a case of, it's almost like falsifying how much you're paying a club sponsorship, wasn't it?
Well, he got his brother to sponsor the shirt last year on the back, the year before on the front. So is that just Doug's own money that he's regurgitating? You don't know, do you?
No, I mean,
and also, Claudio, just to say, you said I talk too much. Doug Bolam doesn't think so. He said Kieran might be able to silence Simon Jordan, but can he silence our very own Claudio? Well, he did a good job for a little bit.
I got to say, Stefan Borson, and that's the other guy who normally goes on. When the pair of them are on, they just listen. It is fascinating. Normally, Simon Jordan talks over, especially the ex-footballers, especially Martin Keown. Also, in our news, of course, it looks like we're heading to record sales. Me and Jim Brown spoke about this in terms of season tickets. Me and Jim Brown spoke about this on our Part 1 podcast, if you want to listen to it, about transfers, record transfers. How we're, a waiting list, which is just fascinating, incredible, and never happened in my lifetime before. Also, behind me, the green and white shirt of Real Betis, which is actually my shirt, which I bought in the 90s, which I've been told by Luca he wants it back. It's great. It's my shirt, but so I thought I'd hang it up there as soon as we're playing them in a friendly, which is, isn't it wonderful to have? I mean, we had Werder Bremen last year, even Everton, to get proper friendlies back on our home turf. It's great, isn't it, Jack?
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's just showing that the ambition of the club's moving forward. I actually read the other day that, so obviously we've got Real Betis coming to Coventry. Who'd have thought it? Luton Town have got the wonders of an away day at Boreham Wood.
Oh, there you
Now,
go.
we played Boreham Wood in the FA Cup ages ago in our League 2 days and flew past them like it was nothing. Maybe Luton might get a tight 1-1. You never know.
I did look at the Bristol Rovers away friendly, and I thought, oh, I fancy that. Then I realised I'm on holiday, and then I realised it's my wedding anniversary as well. So I don't. If we'd have been here, I don't think Caroline would have liked to visit the Portaloos at Bristol Rovers behind the goals. Which is
That I think it's the worst stadium I've ever been to. It's like Accrington Stanley might be smaller and have less facilities, but at least it's a ground. It's not a snippet of a ground there and then a different ground there that stands up there, then low there, then it's 2 tiers, then it's 1 tier. It's awful.
It's
Awful.
it used to be a cricket ground, I think, wasn't it, or a rugby ground? I don't know what it was. It's 7 different stands, isn't it? It's bizarre. But the Real
7 per start side.
the Real Betis is a fantastic fixture, and unfortunately, I think Anthony's gone back to Man United now, hasn't he? So we can't boo him either.
I was just thinking, let's hope that they make the deal permanent and he can start and do his little fidget spinner down. Can you imagine if he does that little fidget spinner thing down by Singer's Corner? We're going to throw things at him, aren't we?
Oh yeah. Of course, we don't condone that. That's just Jack doing that. I don't.
Yeah, just me. It's just me.
Yeah. This is from Dorda Wilford in Gambia, West Africa. Just to say, I've not been able to get the Sky Blues podcast the last 2 Sundays. What happened? I tuned in on YouTube. Well, we're only doing Thursdays at the moment during the close season. So only Thursday nights at the moment. So, any more news, Jack, you can think of?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. With 2 pre-seasons, we've got 12,500 season tickets sold in very quick time. We've got a waiting list for season tickets. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, and I've got me and Luke got our tickets last night. We thought we'd just get on with it. Before you know it, you've run out of time and some bugger sat in your seat.
You've got 2 weeks, haven't you? I think it's the 19th of June, is it, that you've got until to reserve your seats if you're an existing season ticket holder?
Yeah, it is wonderful. And I think Keith, I've noticed, because Keith's tickets and his son's tickets are in my group of, what do you call them? Managed tickets, whatever, on the system. And they've disappeared. So I'm presuming Keith has renewed all the way from Canada again, which is incredible. I'll read some of these comments out. Steve Porter's put Leicester minus 27 points, hopefully.
Doesn't sound like it, does it?
The trouble is, if they're as good as Leeds, say, they'll still get promoted, won't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit crap, isn't it, really? Paul Stratton, I think majority 15 million injection is to mostly cover operating costs, not major transfers. It's just nice to think he's put in a lot of money, Doug King has, of his own money, and we could mock it. Some people do because he's not Mike Ashley or some billionaire, but it's a lot of your own money when he's not even from this area. I know he's got a business in Stratford. You know, he's not a local man. He's got a local business, but so it's a hell of a gesture, whatever. And it does feel like our club's alive, doesn't it, Jack?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, people could point the finger at Doug when he bought the club and say, oh, he's actually just Sisu in disguise. But I think we've moved away from that. Whatever the stigma was around this club, and it was here for a long time, with lack of investment, visible investment as well, dropping down to the 4th tier. Yes, we clawed our way back into the Championship under Sisu, but we've all hailed that as a Mark Robbins achievement, not necessarily a Sisu achievement. And where we were from 8 years ago, being relegated to League 2, that was a dark day for this club. We've been to Northampton Town, we've played home games at Burton Albion, and to where we are now, knocking on the door of the Premier League. We're a profit-making club for the first time in however long. What's not to love? What is not to love about this club at the moment? It can give you some heartbreak, like it has at Wembley 2 years in a row, and at Sunderland for those who went, and even for those who watched online on TV. It can give us heartbreak, but you would much rather the heartbreak of missing out on getting to the Premier League than you would in relegating to League 2 all over again.
And the way we're doing it is a bit like Brentford because they had a couple of heartbreaks. A lot of these teams who eventually get into the Premier League have to go through a couple of playoff final defeats. It's just the way it is. It's, you know, it's character building, and you know, it's just, we've been very unlucky in the playoff final against Luton, and even as we know, the Sunderland match, we're almost, you know, looked like it was heading to penalties, wasn't it? Anything could have happened, and the final proved anything can happen in a one-off game. So I think as a fan base, we've got to embrace this while you can. It does not happen that often in the history of Coventry City. You just look through the record books, it doesn't happen that often, and it's just been a blast, hasn't it? The last 7 seasons just been crazy, really, absolutely crazy. Bob Bidwell says, could Mike Ashley already own CCFC, but through an offshore entity that's run by Mr. King as a company in the UK, and no need to know. Our retro kits have improved the last 2 years. Who knows? Who knows? But like me and Jack says, Doug doesn't like rumours. So if you hear rumours of players, the chances are it's not that player. It'd probably be the player from the club down the road or something. Very rarely has any rumours happened, and they've come off, have they, Jack? I don't think there's many.
No, I think anything that's, if a rumour happens, we either sign him in within 48 hours, or it just has never been the case. So we heard about the Preston right back, the Villa right back that was on loan at Preston. That was, what, 2 weeks ago? Nothing since. The latest one is Emile Rees, who's out of contract at Preston. He could be a handful, but we can't add him to the books if we're still keeping Hadji, Sims, Asante and Bassett. You can't just add another striker and that fixes things. We all know that the problems are at the back. I know we didn't score enough to get past Sunderland, but if we'd have fixed up at the back, we'd have won the games. So, you know, rumours are rumours, and we'll probably sell before we buy. I think that's probably the main thing that's going to happen this summer.
I mean, I'm not saying he's the answer, but Rees is the type of player that can do that one striker role up front, probably more effectively than Ellis can, I think, in terms of holding the ball and bullying other defenders. Whether he scores goals, that's a different matter, but he has scored goals, hasn't he? So it's, you know, if your main 5 attacking players, be it forwards or midfielders, score 10 goals each, you got a chance, haven't you? Yeah.
Well, yeah. Look at the season before the one just gone. Emile Rees was scoring quite a lot. He was up there within the Championship Golden Boot race, and Preston finishing their normal mid-table position. He stopped scoring this season as many, and Preston ended up near the bottom of the table. So he's proven as a goal scorer. He's proven as a handful, and like Claudia says, he's clearly a striker that can play on his own, because he has done it fairly successfully. So should he be someone we gamble on a free? Maybe, if we can but again, we have to offload.
David Green says, I really enjoyed that, very interesting and thought-provoking. Anthony Pettifer, have you heard the AD interview part 1? I have, and part 2. I thought AD comes across very well, but there's still only so much he'll say, which is the stories are good though, but it's, you know, he's obviously not going to say stuff that fans want to hear. It ain't going to happen. Gavin Collins, well done, guys. Brilliant to get that kind of insight for us all. Thank you, Gavin. Ian Small, guys, you spent the 10 million profit. Grimes, Rudy, Dovin, Binks. Have we? I don't know. Paul Stratton says the Championship hardest league to buy your way out of.
It's been done though.
Anthony Pettifer, AD mentioned the manager several times, but never said Mark. Yes, that's right. Mad Frankie says, Aji called up to carry the hot dogs. So I don't know about that. Steve Porter, we all think we are better than we are.
But do we? Because we've made the playoffs twice, and we've made an FA Cup semi-final, should have been final. You know, we're clearly good enough to be in the top area of the Championship at the moment.
What I will say, and this is controversial, are we any better off as a team from 2 years ago? Then we got to play our final.
Yes, I think we're better off as a team.
But no, but are we better off as a team or better off as a club? Which is, I think, two different things. Yeah, I think we're more.
Both.
I'm just thinking, have we improved that much on the pitch compared to the season we got to the playoffs?
As an 11, I mean, it depends, because if you're talking about a loaning of Callum Doyle, he's improved the team, but he's not improved the club. Whereas owning players that we do now, we have a better squad than we did. Bearing in mind we were 5 loan players, which was our entire back 5 at one point. We own all of our players, which is a positive step forward. It's maybe not the perfect thing on a pitch, but it is a positive step forward. And the fact that we've hit consistently, 2 playoff attempts, 1 successful, 1 unsuccessful. And the main reason it was unsuccessful was because of a very, very good FA Cup run. So, yeah. I mean, you could argue it both ways. I think we are better off, personally.
It's interesting because when Doug came in, we sold, obviously, Hamer and Gyökeres. I said at the time, now we'll see what kind of a manager Mark is, because he's got money to spend, whereas before it was on a shoestring, wasn't it? And a lot of us felt the money wasn't spent wisely. But then you look at, these are the players that are in the squad now. So you're saying we're better now. So he did spend the money wisely then, if that's the case.
Well, it works to an extent, doesn't it? It's worked. It's not got us over the line to the Premier League, but it's worked to keep us in that argument, bearing in mind we've lost a European Golden Shoe winner and a Premier League quality player, well, 2 Premier League quality players in both of them. So we've sold 2 assets, we've gained a mass amount of money, and we've improved everywhere on the pitch. Maybe not as an entire defensive unit because we're shipping more goals, and we don't have one striker that scored over 20 goals in the season. But as a unit, as a whole squad, it's got better, it's got deeper. And the only reason we were as good 2 years ago is because we had 5 loanee defenders.
So for me now, I think this is the important summer transfer window. And this is where we see, I think this season, what Frank Lampard can do, because he's got the whole season. And forget what's happened now. It's gone. We got to the playoff semi-final, whatever. He only had half a season. I think now's the time to kind of judge what Frank can do is this season. Because he's obviously going to bring players in. I'd have thought so. And see what happens there. I'm really excited. I may not sound it, but I am. I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely looking forward to it. And we've said it in other shows. It's just great to see people out and about, got the shirts on. To be told when I had my birthday party, and you were there, in Borsall Common, to be told by the guy there at the tennis club saying that whenever there's a Cov match, it's the only time it's really full. When they have Villa and Birmingham on, it's not that busy, but when Cov's playing, it's the busiest they get, which is incredible. Because this is like the Birmingham Villa heartland in Borsall Common. Whether or not you got ex-Cov people have moved out this way, that could be the case. But the fact is, when Cov are on the box, they're being watched, which is fantastic. Absolutely. Rich Stedman says, best of luck next season, lads. I've tipped you for top 4 finish. You have a good team. Keep them together with a few fresh faces and you'll be a fave to go up. Paul Stratton, this is interesting. On the good size season, ticket sales going well. Waiting list is at 600. Great news. That's incredible. Oh, absolutely love it. Nicholas James, we keep our best players, build is exactly what we need to do. I believe it will be an exciting season for us, and Frank will build a team that will take us to the next level. Ben Green says, so glad I got my season ticket before the waiting list. Bomber Bidwell says, yes, great guest. Doug Bonham, should have gone to Swindon in the 90s, Jack. Then you'll know how bad a stadium could be. We went there pre-season not so long ago. Dark Farts. Yeah. That was a terrible. I think we won 2-1 or 2-0. Jamie Allen got injured. That's when he did his pelvis in.
Was that there?
Yeah, and then Dabo was playing, and I remember all going on because, of course, he replaced Grimmer. It'd have been, wouldn't it? at the time, and we're going, "Oh, he's no replacement for Jack Grimmer. He's terrible," and he wins Player of the Year. So that season
Shows what you know, Claudio.
I know. Dark Farts. I'm from Borsal Common originally. Blues and Villa Cov mix supporters there. Ryan Evans. Would you guys have Wilson back? He's a free agent. I could see Lamps try and bring him back with us. That might excite Callum, helping us get to the Prem. Yeah, I don't know how it works now, because these guys, they've been on Premiership money, Premier League wages. Have they earned enough to just not earn that much? Don't know.
Take Andy Carroll. He's on what, $1,000 a week, is it, in Bordeaux? I mean, he's in the south of France. It's lovely, I'm sure. But yeah, we wouldn't pay his wages. I mean, Louis Binks is rumoured to be on 30k and is rumoured to be our highest earner. Callum would be on double that.
That's what I wanted to ask Kieran. I should have wrote that down. Is how much truth is there when people say, "Oh, so and so's on so much"? How do we know? I can't believe it's that easily accessible to find out what players are on. Mick Davenport says, "Where do we stand in regards to keepers? Do we rely on Clown Collins, or do we get a short-term replacement?" He may just stick with Wilson and may not change anything.
I'll tell you what I'd like to see happen. And again, it won't because of wages. I'd like just to see go and get Lucas Fabianski on a free.
All right,
it's not going to happen. We'll have to pay him too much, but getting him in with his experience in the Premier League, he's still a good player. He's still a Premier League quality keeper. He might be about 55, but he would absolutely do a job for us for a season.
You know, I was watching the Champions League final, and the Italian keeper plays for obviously PSG, Donnarumma, and he made his debut at 16 for AC Milan, and I totally forgot when they said they got such a young team, and then they said Donnarumma's 26. I thought, is he? I thought, yeah, he made his debut at 16, didn't he? So it just feels like he's been here that long. That it was in his mid-30s or something. He doesn't play like that for Italy, mind.
He did in the bloody Euro final.
We've got Norway away tomorrow night. That's going to be a tricky one. We've not played a World Cup qualifier yet, which is worrying. And if we lose, if we lose to Norway, they've already got 9 points on the board. So it'll be another World Cup watching, not Italy. Nicholas James, I'm really excited too. Well said, Claudia. We have lots to be excited about and proud of. We have earned this success. I think that too. You got to, you got to love it while you can. It says it doesn't last forever. Gavin Collins, if we get a quick start to the season, and the rest of the league will put on notice as we have a true winner in Lampard with his mentality. He will instill that into his team. With a few quality additions in defence, we can win the league, especially with the fan base behind them.
Gav is one of the more optimistic Leamington and Warwick Supporters Club fans that on the bus. Fair enough. I mean, I don't see why that's not the case. If we carry on our home form and we can improve the away form a little bit, we're going to easily be a top 6 club. May even be knocking on the door at the top 2. Take Ipswich from 2 years ago. They had to compete with Leeds, Leicester, and Southampton, and they got an automatic spot. So we've got to compete with, who is it? Leicester, Southampton, Ipswich, and Sheffield United. Who's to say we can't do it?
But Kieran said Ipswich were losing 800 grand a month or something. They're paying.
Yeah, but they've also just sold their best player for 30 million. So
that's a gamble to get out the Championship. It's incredible. I knew they're paying, but I didn't realise it was that much. That's a lot. Lee Beckett. What about Angus Gunn on a free? Well, yes, exactly.
Yeah, take that. I'd take that for sure.
Paul Stratton. I hope Hadji does well for the USA. Hopefully, we can make a profit on him to get a goal-scoring striker with a pair of cogliones, as they say.
So you're Italian coming out, is it?
Yeah, I don't know why. It's still rude if you say it in Italian or English. So it doesn't matter. So, Mick Davenport, Collins needs to go. He must have cost us 15 points. He did, but we would have still gone up automatically, would we? 40. I think we can. I think we can sort out the silly goals we like conceding. Then I think we'll be able to make a title charge. That would be excellent. I don't think there's much else, is there, Jack? I think we've covered it.
Yeah, obviously we've lost John Taylor.
Yes.
Because from last week's show, we talked about it was basically going to happen, but and it did. Obviously on Friday, John Taylor left. Replacement with immediate effect. I can't remember the lady's name for the life of me, but very, very good portfolio and CV on her hands that we've got. I don't know how we've pulled someone like her. I think it's going to be good for the club. It must be a step up because Doug obviously thought highly of John Taylor when he replaced Dave Boddy, and to get rid of someone that you only bought in 18 months ago, not even, to to make a step forward as a football club, it can only be good. It can only be a good thing.
Yeah, but it's a different role because he was operations manager. I can tell you now, Doug King's operating things. So he's obviously going to take that role on, which is basically what Dave Boddy did as a CEO, which means, for the life of me, I can't remember her name now. She's coming as a commercial director. So slightly different, isn't it? So
yeah, I think the role might not be exactly the same, but it's going to be a similar-ish, I think, personally.
Yeah, I think he's moving the club in a different direction in terms of the commercial side and digitalising it and that sort of thing. More modern, if that makes any sense.
I'm just trying to look on the club's website, and they've still got John Taylor on here. So whoever updates the website, get to it. I can't find the lady's name. Anyone in the comments, have you got the lady's name?
Terrible, isn't it? John Maddox says, Claudio, which Italian team do you support? I support Juventus. Yes, that's my Italian team. It's basically who my dad supported, so it's that's how it works. Nicholas James says, a mark of where we are, was just love to hear, was Milan saying he would happily spend the rest of his career with us. Got to love him even more. Nicola, that's it. Well done, Chris Brook. Thank you.
I've literally just found it as well. Well done, Doug Bolam and Chris.
Nicola Ibbotson.
Ibbotson, I think. I don't know.
Ibbotson. She was at PSG, Chelsea, Man United, Aston Villa. Now, people have said, why would she leave PSG to come to us? But in the corporate world, people move around. They don't stick around very long in the same place. Going by my daughter, my oldest daughter, who had a great job for 2 years and just went, right, I'm going to go to another great job. And that's how they operate, because you get promotions, you get more wages and all the rest of it. That's how it works in the corporate world, I think. So, and it's new challenges. And maybe she wanted to come back to England. So, it's one of those, isn't it? And I mean, who are PSG anyway?
She's been at the Villa.
Exactly. So, yes.
Oh, well. So, Callum O'Hare did all right. He came from the Villa. So, positives, people.
Paul Stratton, Claudia, do you think Doug will back us to the next level? I don't know. I really don't know. I think with Frank Lampard, he has to. But I don't think, Frank's not a miracle man. We need a bit more. And I'd like to think that he will back him. And it'd be nice to get a couple of players in that makes you go. To me, Grimes was one of those players. When we signed him, I thought, oh, that's a good signing straight away. And he's proved to be a good signing. That's the sort of level we're at now, I think.
Well, I was having a conversation with a colleague at work who's a Cov fan, season ticket holder, and he was saying, why don't we go back in for Dom Hyam? Go and pinch him really cheap from Blackburn. And my excuse was, if you go from, let's say, fourth choice centre half in Latibodia, his level's there. If you go to Hyam, that's going like that, there's a bit of an improvement in my opinion, but that doesn't take us to the next level. Whereas if we went and got Callum Doyle, who's looking to move from Man City, it would cost us 10 times the amount as it would for Dom Hyam, but we'd go from there to there in terms of the ability. He'd be first choice, he'd be on the team sheet, he'd be playing every single game. He's had 3 years experience in this league now, and I think he's an unbelievable player at this level.
And if you give him a 4-year contract, you're not going to lose money on him. That's the other thing, because if he does well, then you probably end up with a Premier League club trying to get him off you then. So it's somebody can sell for profit, which is basically we are that club still. You know, we still need to bring players in that we then need to sell if we have to. We've got to make money on some of these players. We're not in a position where we can just buy players like Haji Wright, reportedly up to 9 million, and then sell him for 4 or 3 or 2, like some people are suggesting, just to let him go. That's just ridiculous. It's not going to happen. You know, this profit we're making will soon be gone. You can't do it. It's just the way it is. You've got to be sensible. So it'd be interesting. And I'm, like I say, we'll see what happens next week, because I think the window shuts this first window soon, doesn't it? I think
it's Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday, or I can't keep up with this. It's all for this crappy Club World Cup that they're trying to bring into.
We're in it. Juventus are in it, so I'm really excited.
We're not in it. No, sorry, Claudia, I'm not having that. We're not in the Club World Cup.
That's true.
You're whoever you want to like somewhere else are in it. We're not in the Club World Cup, so we don't care.
The thing is, I'll forget when the games are on anyway, because they're probably in the middle of the night or something. So yeah, I'll watch the odd game if I can remember. It's Mad Frankie. We'll just finish on this one, shall we? We'll do Nick first. Nicholas James, spot on, Jack. Matty Grimes is the level. Need to bring in players that quality to get to Premier League. Mad Frankie says Lampard's contracts and reputation need to keep. Will be key to who comes in. I'm confident we are going to make some big signings. It's almost turned into Peaky Blinder then. Chris Brooks, have you heard any internal rumours about player transfers? No. No, you won't. I'll tell you what, you won't. They are that tight-lipped now at the club when it comes to players. So, I mean, what's it, if you say the right time, the clock's released right twice in 24 hours?
You butchered that.
What's the expression?
Even a stopped clock is right twice a day.
Exactly. And if people just keep chucking names out, eventually one of them's going to stick, aren't they? So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. Well, thanks very much for tuning in tonight. It's been great, Jack. Thanks for doing a bit of research with the questions and everything. Lee Dan's put, Claudia, what's this? Supporting 2 clubs. Pick one. Cov or Juve. Well, you know, it's you can have an Italian club. No. But I mean, if ever Cov play Juventus, and obviously I'm a Cov fan, it's simple as that. You know, it's one of those.
Right answer. Right answer.
You know, that's goes without a shadow of a doubt. Right. Thanks very much for tuning in. It was great to have Kieran Maguire on, a fantastic guest, and he said he'll come on when in the future. If you wanted to come on, that'd be brilliant. We'll be back next Thursday. We have no idea what we'll be doing yet, but hopefully it'll be something entertaining. And yeah, wait and see. Cheers, Jack, and I'll let you do the end stream thing, because I'll give you that job to do. Play up Sky Blues.
Yeah, cheers, everyone, and play up Sky Blues.
Yeah, play up Sky Blues. See you.
Sky Blue Fans TV, for the fans, by the fans.